Welcome Internet to Psychoanalytic Talk, and today we're going to talk about reaction formation, a concept that was developed by Freud in the early days of psychoanalysis. It's one of the primary concepts and one that still holds a lot of explanatory power. So what is reaction formation? Well, first and foremost, I'm going to have to go back to a rough and quick explanation of Freudian drive theory. For Freud, all the energy of the mind, all of it, the psyche, is linked to the drives. So there is the life drive and the death drive. I'm not going to talk about the death drive, but the life drive is what basically puts the mind and the body into motion, because it's an alliance of what the body experiences and the mind that is processing that experience, which creates a certain path towards certain phenomena. And sometimes those paths, what the drive lands on, is not quite acceptable. For example, one main thing that's not really acceptable is the interest in body wastes that young children can have. Like, where does it go? Why can't I keep it? And even sometimes like trying to touch it and like explore with it. So it seems that we as adults understand it's unacceptable, but the child in those moments do not, because the child is still very much into the pleasure principle, and what they find funny or amusing or enjoyable, well, they're going to go for it. And basically what Freud expresses through this concept of reaction formation is that the drive still stays very powerful, but in order to develop in terms of maturity and in terms of fitting into society, the child is going to have to repress the drive, and that repression comes with a counterforce, something that's equally as strong but goes in the other direction, i.e. an opposite force. So we talked about how the child can develop interest in bodily waste. That would be the drive. But the counter reaction or the reaction formation would be, for example, that the child then develops a very astute and very serious cleanness. The child might be very, very clean, always try to be clean, not stand in any untidiness or any dirt or anything. Meaning that the child basically is fighting against the very sin that he used to desire or that he used to like. And that is true of the child, but that can also then be true of the adult. For example, a child that loved the untidiness or chaos might have a reaction formation against that and become a very, very organized and very precise individual in order to try and mitigate the desire that he once felt. And what is interesting with this concept is that the desire, it hasn't gone away. The drive is still there for the same object, for the same issue, should I say, because object is not the right word in this context. But this interest is still there, but therefore it always needs to be reinforced, and it always needs to have a counterforce that is in opposition to it. This counterforce and this reaction formation is basically the remnants of the superego, because what Laplanche and Pontalis in the vocabulary of psychoanalysis share in their book is that this reaction formation is mainly going to develop during what is called latency period, i.e. a period in which the drives take a back seat and the child can focus more on learning, on exploring, and so on and so forth. So they in a way, the drives are a little less potent and a little less powerful. It's also the phase in which the superego is going to be constituted and the Oedipus complex is going to be resolved. So it's really a point in which the child is invested into the superego, and it's before the arrival of adolescence and puberty, which is going to re-trigger the drives of infantile life, and then during adulthood it basically is constantly re-triggered. So very fundamentally, this counter reaction or reaction formation is a very important aspect of human development. It allows for basically for a reality principle to form, which will come in opposition with the pleasure principle, meaning that the child is going to be able to get away from it by exerting an opposite force. It's very dynamic, right? There's a force that is for and there's a force that's against, and they clash. However, and this is going to be very important, that reaction formation can be a source of suffering later on in life. So, because what you have to understand is not that it's not because there's a reaction formation that it's egosyntonic, i.e., it's not because it's present that the individual recognizes it as a good part of them or something that they want inside of them. What I mean by that is that, for example, if we go back to the aspect of being tidy, a person might feel that they are forced, that they have to do it, that it's like that, and in no other case can they differ from the tidiness, from the cleanness, not even for a day. They might feel alienated and forced to do it because they feel that if they were to not do it, they would unconsciously, of course, relapse into the desire for dirt and for filth. And that is, for them, in their minds, unacceptable. But it's so rigid that sometimes they can suffer from it. They can feel compelled to tidy up, to clean, because if not, that would be too much. Also, another point would be, for example, in terms of sexuality. If, for example, sexuality was seen as something shameful, disgusting, something unnatural, the adult might have a reaction formation against it, might feel that sex needs to be completely banned or completely obliterated of life and should only serve the purpose of reproduction and not serve any fun whatsoever. And this means that they will go against their drives and their potential enjoyment, which can cause a lot of suffering, both for the individual, but also if they're in a relationship, for the relationship itself, because of expectations, because of certain dynamics. So reaction formation can become pathological in the moment where it hurts people and where it basically becomes an obstacle to the life of the individual. It stops being a useful defense mechanism and becomes one that is an astringent one at that moment where there is suffering from it. Everything is okay if it's egosyntonic, but the moment that it becomes a source of pain, then basically the individual might need psychotherapy in order to understand what they used to like and how to, in a way, be able to rekindle with that without without destroying everything that was built. Because basically it's important to understand that the reaction formation is essential in our development, but it can't overstay its welcome and it can't be too strong. Like, for example, another example of when it could become a problem is if, for example, there used to be a lot of sadism in the child and the child had a reaction formation against that sadism. Well, what's going to happen as an adult is that they might not be able to use any form of aggression, which you might think is a good thing, but it isn't, because you sometimes need to use aggression to be able to set boundaries, to be able to extract yourself from a complicated situation, in order to be able to voice your concerns or your disagreements. So a little bit of aggression is necessary in one's life and is important. But if the reaction formation is too strong, then they won't be able to use that, because they will think that aggression that they basically have a bit of is going back to an infantile sadism where they wanted to murder everyone. So very importantly, it can be a life problem. And psychotherapy can help rekindle that without breaking the whole structure. Because what people are afraid of, unconsciously of course, is once they go back to those drives, that they will be overwhelmed by the drive itself and that they will lose the superego. Whereas when you're an adult, you don't lose your superego. When you rekindle in another way, and you rekindle in a way that respects both the ego and superego. So nothing gets broken down. But because the superego can be so strong, the individual might not be able to go against it, or at least not be able to go against it without the psychotherapeutic relationship, which will give support to the individual. So basically, that's pretty much it for this talk. If you have anything you want to add, feel free to do so in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.